Thank you everyone for coming here today. We are really lucky to have our very talented students and alumni to talk to you about their interview experiences. So let's give a warm welcome to our panelists.
I'm sure you guys all know my name because I've bothered your classes all throughout the year for events and whatnot, but I'm Kevin. I'm a fourth year honors comp sci student. My interests. I'm really into full stack web development, HCI, data science, and machine learning. But more importantly, I love all aspects of computer science, and I always enjoy kind of going out and finding new things to learn. Oh, and I got a job at Microsoft, which I'll be starting this summer.
Well, my name's Tyson Olichuk. You may know my brother, Dustin Olichuk, who goes here. I work at Amazon. I've been there for about 2.5 years. My year of study, I graduated in 2013. And some of my favorite topics are parallel computing, databases, and general software engineering.
So my name's Nolan Korath. I'm a fourth year major here, graduating this year. My interests tend to lean towards full stack web development, and to steal Kevin's answer, pretty much just anything computer science related.
My name is Emily Millard. I'm a fourth year honors computer science major, and my favorite topics, I really like GIS. But I also just like the general software engineering process. But maths are my favorite.
Hello, my name is Anna Offenwinger. I am in my fourth year of the Bachelor of Arts in Computer Science Honors. My favorite topics, I actually like algorithms. I know a lot of you probably hate them, but some people like them.
My name's Mike Nowicki, also fourth year honors computer science. Most of my interests are heavily based in AI and network science and other topics in graph theory. And I got a job at MDA. So I actually started preparing my resume probably back in December, kind of like gathering up everything that I've done throughout my undergrad degree, what I've done outside of my degree, and also my references. That's a big one that I've noticed. Most of the places that I applied for jobs were directly with the company, like through their website. You'll find companies like Google have specifically for students, so you can apply through them. Other companies, it was more like going through the postings and just submitting based on what kind of things they were looking to hire. I've interviewed with Google, a company called MDA, which I'll talk about later, as well as NVIDIA and some other smaller companies from Vancouver.
I started preparing my resume last summer because I was looking for internships. Never actually wound up getting one, but I got contacted by Google through LinkedIn, so I have a feeling that updating my LinkedIn profile was probably one of the best things I did when doing that. I applied to quite a few places for internships. I can't actually remember all of them, but I know I did throw resumes at, usual Yahoo, Amazon, those places. I actually only have interviewed with Google. I did also interview with the city of Kelowna for a job, but didn't wind up getting that.
So I have interviewed with applied pretty much everywhere under the sun. I started looking for a job that I wanted for graduation. I started in November when Google contacted me through a conference that I was going to. So I got my LinkedIn profile ready, and that's a really big one, like Anna said. I can't believe the number of recruiters that have actually contacted me through LinkedIn. And like before I thought, oh, LinkedIn, that's so lame. But recruiters actually do. Like I have gotten job leads through LinkedIn. So the places that I've actually interviewed with, Google, TELUS for their healthcare analyst team, Cronus, which is a company that has an office here, but they're actually based out of Boston. I'm interviewing currently with Twitter, Disney. There's some more in there, but those are the big ones right now.
Just to hammer that point home again, I started preparing mine in December as well after getting contacted by Google through LinkedIn. I've interviewed at Google and White Pages. I pretty much sent my resume out to anyone who would take it. And those were the two that mostly panned out.
Can't really remember when I started preparing my resume. That was 3 years ago. But when it says resume, that doesn't necessarily mean a CV you're going to hand someone. You should be preparing all sorts of code samples, things like that for years before. Push that to Git. Looks great on a resume. Link that. How many resumes did you send out? Tons. Sent them everywhere. Sent them to the company's website and a LinkedIn recruiter, because the more the better. They're not going to get mad at you for sending lots of resumes. Which companies did you interview with? I can't remember. Facebook, Amazon, one in town called FreshGrade, Palantir. There's a bunch. Can't really remember all of them.
Try and maybe say something that hasn't really been said. I heard like a stat or like a fact like a year ago that Google gets about 1 million applications a year. And if you think about like the sheer number of that, like 1 million is an incredibly large number for those who are unaware. To go through that volume is literally impossible. So one of the biggest things with these companies when they're hiring is they're completely okay with accepting false negatives or false positives, okay? They're okay saying a good candidate can no longer be interviewed or is not going to be considered because they're okay passing up with the good people. What they're not okay with is passing up or accepting the bad people. Sorry if that was a little convoluted. So you guys are going to send out a ton of applications. Before this, I just took a quick check on my email and a list that I maintained throughout my application process. I applied to a whole bunch of companies, like an incredible amount. I got denied. So like I got an actual email saying we're no longer considering you from 25 of them. 65 of them never even got back to me. I interviewed with 8 of them. And I like turned down 2 others because I accepted my offer at Microsoft. So you guys are going to send a bunch of applications out, and your resume isn't something you should just like build and then apply. Like I was mentioning earlier, you should build that up over time. So I've had my personal portfolio live for like 2 years, and that just changes over time. Same sort of deal with your resume. Can you tell us about your interview experience? Oh, yes. Probably should have prepared something legit for this. So I guess I'll make this my kind of longer answer because I did feel my kind of activities, I guess, at my interview were basically exclusively the reason I landed the job. So at Microsoft, it's a little bit weird. With these bigger companies, you apply through their online thing. You can contact a recruiter, which will kind of forward your process if they see something they like. So I applied online and I emailed the recruiter. You go to their website. It says, find your recruiter. I found her, sent her an email. Hey, I'm super interested. And she lined up a phone interview. And you're doing this with someone completely non-technical. It's just someone who's there to type it down, basically. And they asked me pretty standard questions like, why Microsoft? And tell us about a project that did X or demonstrates Y. And those questions, they sound a little bit like fluff and a little bit, oh, there's a right answer. You can just Google that and find that. It's truly not the case. Before this interview, I took a lot of time to kind of prepare, I would say, mental notes and physical notes of why Microsoft. And I took down a list and quite literally thought, like, why Microsoft? And I came up with very specific defining features. Like, I've used their products my entire life. They've literally shaped the way I interact with the computer. It's the same reason every time I want to close something, I look at the top right. I mean, these things kind of reached me at a higher level, and I truly was kind of inspired to pursue Microsoft. Beyond that, so flash forward a little while, I did the phone interview. Top candidates or whatever got straight flowing down, and then I guess people they wanted to consider further had another phone screening, which was like a programming interview over the phone. So I was fortunate enough to have answered the fluff questions correctly and got flowing down. And that was like, honestly, the coolest experience of my life. I don't want to sound like super cliche about it or anything, but I got flown down there and I knew the campus was crazy. I knew it was awesome, but I got there and I was literally breathless. Like I was blown away. You walk around there, and if any of you guys have been to UBC Van, like it's bigger than that. There's like, I think there's something like 30,000 employees there. Like just seeing something of that magnitude really blew me away. And sorry if I'm going to go long on this. I'll promise I'll keep my other answers way shorter. But like when I started meeting these people, they basically flew us all down as candidates for one day. So there was, I think, 28 of us in the afternoon session, and there was another 25 in the morning. And they basically had us all interviewing with the entire team. So you'd do a 45-minute interview and then another 45 and there were like 15-minute breaks, so for a total of 4 interviews in the afternoon. And like I got there, they get us sitting down at lunch, and you can kind of interact and mingle with the other candidates. So I start like talking to these people, and again, like I'm this flabbergasted 4-year-old with the biggest smile on his face, just blown away at like the campus and everything I'm looking at. And I start talking to these people. I'm like, hey man, like where are you from? It's like Boston. I'm like, oh cool. Like what school do you go to? And I kid you not, this guy looked at me and he's like, MIT, and he just looked away. I'm like, wow, you are the most pompous, like self-entitled person I've ever met. And any other day, I would have verbally made fun of that person just because I'm a very confrontational kind of guy. But again, I was just so stoked to be there, and I truly think that that was the biggest reason that my interviews went really well. The technical aspects of my interview, I'm not lying, I didn't ace any of them, really. I mean, I got a working solution eventually and that kind of stuff, but when I was there, I was really kind of just excited to be there, and I think that showed. God, this is a really long answer, but I guess last thing I'll talk about is like the team I was interviewing with was the health team. So they basically have like a Nike Fitbit equivalent that you have, and amongst a ton of other things for their company. But they kind of asked you like, why would you be interested in working with us? Like, what is kind of your motivating factor behind pursuing this job? And I'm really into personal fitness. Like, I work out a lot. I do a lot of sports kind of thing. I didn't bring that up once. And you kind of think, like, why not? Like, you think that's a direct parallel, but you got to think about who you're talking with when you're interviewing. So I was interviewing with software engineers. They don't want to hear some jock saying he lifts weights 4 times a week, whatever it is, right? Like, that's not going to apply to them. One thing I did that I think really helped me, and my interviewers, who's now, I guess, my coworker, kind of told me this after I Skyped with them upon getting the offer, was that I would basically listen for when they were introducing themselves, kind of what was their role, what they were interested in. So the first guy I sat down with starts talking about his responsibilities, and he was the back-end web lead. So instantly, I started talking about all my experience with that. Another guy was the big data guy, so I started talking about all my experience with my honors project that I'm doing. Another guy was leading up the mobile team, which was Android, iOS, BlackBerry, and Windows, and he was complaining about how the code's a mess and they're trying to get it all centralized. So in my answer for his technical question, I really focused on the modularity of my code and making sure everything was very dry and everything was very clean. So really just listen to who your interviewers are and tailor your answers towards that. And that doesn't mean necessarily lie about yourself or anything, but really kind of show the parts of you that relate to them, because that's what they're looking for.
My answer has to be shorter than that. So this is 3 years ago, of course. I can't really tell the exact process that I went through because I work there and I'm not supposed to do that. But I can tell you that you're going to get a lot of algorithmic questions on your interviews. Computer science basics, there's not going to be anything fancy. They're not going to try and trick you. No matter how bad you feel you're doing, you don't worry about that. You're getting judged based on how you're doing relative to other candidates. Or not so much even that, but everybody might be bombing this question that you're on. Don't worry if you are. And yeah, basically just study fundamentals. It's easy. There's books that can help you too. There's only a small number of questions when you boil down to it, and always use a hash map or set. It's just gonna be better.
It's very true.
Yeah, big O complexity is a very good thing. So use a hash map and you'll do great.
So I'm currently actually in the last stages of interviewing with White Pages. I can't talk too much about it because they make you sign an NDA, which you guys will have happen quite a bit. But we went down to the Vancouver Career Fair, which I highly recommend doing, and just went to as many companies as we could. It was kind of the end of the day. We weren't really sure as to whether or not I was going to go to the White Pages booth because they had such a long line, but they were giving out awesome t-shirts if you finished their coding problem. So I ended up going through the line. They gave you a coding problem, not too bad. Had to submit it on paper. If they like that, then you go through to an online test. That's as far as I can go because that's when I signed the NDA. The online test is fair. But the main thing is just knowing your data structures and your algorithms, and definitely know your big O complexity. I've never been in an interview where they don't ask you at the end, and what is the complexity of this? But yeah, just make sure you know what you're doing.
So I'll talk about my experience with Disney because I did get an offer from them. So it started, I applied online through Stack Overflow Careers, and then the recruiter contacted me. And like Kevin said, I told her that I had worked with SQL Server before, and she asked me, how do you spell SQL? So it's like, that's what you're dealing with. So with those, like, talk more about your experiences and stuff like that. And what I found really works for me is to have the actual job in front of me, because you forget after the 50th job that, oh yeah, this job, they wanted to know that I had worked with jQuery before or whatever it is. So make sure when you're talking to that recruiter, you're like, yeah, and on this project we did, and hit all those spots. After that, I had a phone screen, and with different companies, it varies. With Disney, it was just on the phone. There was no, like, when I interviewed with Google and with Twitter, it's like you're actually typing back and forth using Google Doc or Codility. So this was, how do you reverse a linked list on the phone? And I was like, oh my God. So that's what that was, with another programmer. And then I came in, and I think what's unique about Disney and some of the other smaller companies that I have applied with is with Amazon and Google, they don't really care about, so Java or whatever language you're using is a vehicle to make sure you know general computer science concepts. But with the smaller companies, and even Disney, because it was a smaller team, you need to know what is a JVM, how do you make a variable non-serial, those, if you're interviewing for a Java position. So just know that when you're interviewing with the smaller companies, and if you say you're going to be a Java developer, they don't just mean, can you use the Java hash map library? Can you, like, do you actually know what all of those little things mean that we learned in 111? And then the on-site, and we've all forgotten. And then the on-site with them was just meeting the team, and there was a little bit of a coding test, handwritten, and it was more just, basics, like threading. I had to start a thread. There was some stuff to do with Java web programming, so like the stuff we learned in 304, and then lots of data structures. So if you've forgotten 222, go back to that textbook or buy another textbook, because that is all most of these interviews are.
Like I said, really the only company I actually interviewed with was Google. They contacted me through LinkedIn, and I got a 15-minute phone call with one of their recruiters. They basically asked me those questions, which I really should have been expecting. Why do you want to work for Google? I wasn't, so my answers weren't that great, but I somehow managed to get through, and they put me onto their online test where you just have to, code a couple simple samples. Then they send you on to another interview stage where you're online typing through Google Doc with one of their programmers. If you get through that, then they fly you down to wherever you're looking to work with, and then you spend pretty much the entire day coding. It's almost exactly like Microsoft, only instead of doing everybody in a group, everybody's individual. I did actually get a chance to talk to some of the other people who were interviewing, which was kind of cool. We were just, sitting in the lobby area waiting for the person we were interviewing with, and yeah. They just kind of talked to some of the people, and it was kind of funny because a couple of them were actually working for Microsoft and considering switching over. So, yeah, sorry, Kevin.
Just blow me out, eh?
Yeah. So, when I was doing the interviews, they asked me a lot of questions that I didn't actually know the answer to. I didn't actually know that you should use a hash map. That was what one of the guys on the phone interview told me to do. And then once I figured that out, used it in every single other one of the interviews. So yeah, it's the main thing that I figured out from that was it's okay not to know things. And it's a really good idea to work with your interviewer. Google especially, they say, like, yeah, just ask whatever it is that you need to know. So if you don't know whether or not such a data structure exists that can run in, ON time, then, ask the interviewer. They might be able to point you to the right document, and they will do lookups for you and give you the code that you need to solve these problems. So yeah, and then algorithms. One of the questions, which I actually did very badly on, I'm 100% sure we actually did cover in the algorithms class, which, did not make that interview very fun, sitting here thinking, I really ought to know how to do this, and I cannot remember.
With MBA, actually, there's a couple things that I'll hit on when I was interviewing with them. When I first was contacted by them, I had to go through the stereotypical phone screen. So why do you want to work with us? Like, what do you know about our company? That kind of stuff like that. The one thing, though, that I actually managed to use to my benefit was the fact that I was going through further interviews with companies like Google and other ones out there. And it actually sped up my interview process with them. Initially, before I even brought that up, they told me it would be about 2 to 3 weeks before they contacted me for the next technical interview and other things like that. As soon as I mentioned these other things, they really sped up the process. And next thing I knew, within 5 days, I was doing not just the technical interview, but also meeting with the managers and the heads of the department and doing all these interviews with them. And then later the next week, they were actually contacting my references and actually sent me out an offer. So you can actually kind of play these other companies against each other. They know that companies like Google, because of the mass amount of people who apply to them, it takes them time to really find the candidates they're looking for. So if you can pressure a bunch of companies at the same time saying, yeah, I'm interviewing with X, I'm interviewing with Y, if they're interested in you, they will really speed up the process. As other people have said, 222 is extremely important. Remember how you traverse like a binary tree. How do you do binary search? All those kind of things that you think are just trivial, they're actually really important and drive everything in the industry. The other one, of course, is 320, the algorithms course. Know how to do dynamic programming, all these other kinds of things, because that will get thrown at you. The one thing that my experience was that was slightly different than other people's other people have mentioned, I had to do like those discussions and analysis and all that kind of stuff. But in my interview, they actually threw a massive block of code at me. And they're like, here's 8 unit tests, find why all of them fail. And it wasn't even that they were failing, but things like in Java, for example, when you have a try catch, you can throw the most generic just catch exception. But you have to realize, no, in this situation, you don't want to throw the generic one, like what actual exceptions are you looking for, things like that. So if you're interviewing with a company and you say, yeah, I'm really good at Java, I'm really good at C++, any kind of things like that, make sure you actually know like the intricacies of that language, not just I can assign a variable of value, but how do I actually program in a smart way that's readable for me, other users, and really maintainable. So that was the one thing that I found in that interview to be really interesting, was like, how do I take other people's code and find these little mistakes that might not even be mistakes, but how can you improve upon that code? How can you make that code more effective in the language that you're working in? So yeah, that's the other advice I'd throw at that one. I guess I got to do the next question, so just flying blind here. What type of work will I be doing with this company? I'm actually not allowed to go into too much detail with MDA. In case, I guess I haven't really hit on this point, in case nobody knows what MDA is, they're one of the largest contracting companies out in Canada that works for the Canadian Space Agency. They branched out in the United States and they work for NASA and a bunch of other companies like that, or foundations like that. So I actually can't go into a whole lot of detail. My job hiring process is contingent on me getting a level 2 security check. What I can say though is essentially the team that I'm joining will be launching 3 new imaging satellites in the next couple of years, and I'll be working on various ground control systems that help maintain these satellites and other things like that. And in particular with this one, it's a lot of C++ development, not a whole lot of front end, it's mostly back end. How can you drive these things? My background in AI is really helpful because it's a lot of automated planning, operations management. So given a whole bunch of requests for, hey, I want an image of this place, and another company wants an image of another place, and so on and so forth, how do you actually schedule these things in a way that's most efficient using of their resources? So that's the kind of stuff that I'll be involved in.
So what type of work will you be doing at this company? I actually don't know yet. The position that I got is the software engineering residency program, which is basically, they find that there's a lot of stuff that they want people to know coming out of university that they generally don't. In this case, I think it was mostly parallel computing, now thinking I should have taken that course, and testing, because we don't get a whole lot in terms of just how to do proper unit testing. So they've given me an offer for their residency program, which, from what I understand, consists of 3 months worth of just teaching. They'll stick everybody who's in the program in a room and teach them the things that they don't know, and then they rotate you around different teams to basically figure out what is the best fit for you in that situation. What type of work do I hope to get? Well, it'd be really cool to find out how Google search actually works. So yeah, I don't know yet, but really, I'm game for anything. It'd be really cool just to work with these people.
So unfortunately, I'm one of the sad stories of there was an offer presented to me and we agreed upon it and then it was rescinded. So if you saw the news from Disney, I was technically one of the people that was never working but laid off. So I don't have a job right now. Working at Disney, it would have been working on some back-end software that helps support their customer service reps. But I'm interviewing with TELUS, Kronos, and Twitter. Or if anyone else has a job for me, I will take that too.
So as I said, I'm in the final stages right now of interviewing with White Pages for a full stack developer position. So good balance between back and front end. They actually have a really cool software stack, really modern, Ruby on Rails, Solar, Scala, Python. So I get to play with pretty much all the fun stuff if I do get it. So full stack is kind of the direction that I want to go. I applied all over. I can say that web development is very much alive at the moment.
Will I be doing? I'm already there, but I'm working on the item data quality team for Amazon. Basically what my job is to make sure that everything on Amazon is uniform and pretty. We hate if you look at a detail page and you don't know what you're looking at, a bunch of mangled mess, doesn't have the attributes you need. Combating that basically. Technologies we're using a lot of AWS services, which is Amazon Web Services. That doesn't make sense. Lots of Hadoop, which is parallel programming, basically kicking off big clusters and doing batch work, as well as SQL database and NoSQL databases. When you're not going to really be doing one specific thing at a company, you're going to be doing a lot of different things. So be ready for that. You're not going to be the Hadoop guy. You're not going to be the database guy. You're going to be a little bit of every guy, which is what me and everyone else is at Amazon.
So as I was mentioning a little bit earlier, I'm going to be working with the health team. They do the Nike Fitbit equivalent I was talking about. They're also doing a really cool thing with syncing up patient records. So if you go to like a walk-in clinic, you get your, record updated. That information is also going to be available across other health vendors. It's a little bit different in the States how healthcare works, but they're also doing something similar in Canada and a few other countries. I'm specifically going to be working with either the back-end web portion of the team or the cloud computing team, the cloud network team. So I'm not totally sure which yet, and they haven't decided either. They just know that those are my kind of two options. And I guess the reason that I'm presented with those is kind of my experience working with the BC Cancer Agency last year. Was all kind of basically what they're exploring, and I kind of picked that up during the interview as that's what they're kind of looking for, and I kind of drilled that home. So again, really just know what your interviewer's looking for and kind of talk about those experiences, and those are the kinds of jobs you're going to get. They're not going to give you a job where you have zero experience in that field unless you show a clear potential to learn it quickly. So I have experience in web, and that's what I'm going to be working with. I guess this kind of applies, kind of doesn't. Was I always successful to begin with? When I started my university education, I honestly wasn't even interested in computer science. I was starting off with a business degree and a computer science degree. It was like a combined double degree program at University of Waterloo. And I wasn't great at programming to begin with at all. I got like 58% in my first programming class, and now my average is like 30% higher than that. So no, I was really bad at programming when I started. So, I mean, if you're not quite getting the academic grades, there's a complete difference between the academic grade and the applied skill. Hopefully the profs aren't mad at me for saying that, but there truly is. I mean, it takes a certain type of person to be able to learn independently and pick up the skills on the weekend and have that drive to really like mentally embrace what it means to be a developer, as opposed to an academic who's okay kind of just reading a textbook and learning a specific type of problem or whatever. Not to say that that knowledge is completely separate or unrelated. It definitely goes hand in hand. But to be successful, it just takes effort and a lot of drive and motivation. I'll leave the second question for someone else because I don't have like a good answer.
So as these people will find out, there's a lot of stuff you're not going to be good at when you start. For me, at least in terms of getting a job, I used to really suck at interviewing because I'm not very good at talking publicly. But you just fake that you're good at it, and eventually you become good at it. So it's easy. In terms of computer science related things, I used to not be very good with parallel processing. Didn't really have much experience on that, and that's mainly what I'm doing at Amazon. You just gotta hammer away at it and learn it. What did you do? Just keep going at it.
So I know personally when we started doing dynamic programming, I was floored by it, and it took me quite a while to wrap my head around it. But once I did, it was a lot better.
I take my answer back. That's definitely part of mine as well.
Yeah, I actually remember sitting in a room on a whiteboard while Kevin was manually drawing out a table for the knapsack problem, just very angry I couldn't get it at that point. But we got through it. And the other thing is definitely parallel programming, as was said, which I hope to figure out before my final in like 4 weeks. But yeah, probably one of the most valuable things in university, in my opinion, is not having anybody hold your hand anymore, which I'm sure will be even less in the real world. But it's just kind of facing those things, getting over it, and learning how to be better.
So I have been very fortunate that during my time here, I have had really, really, really good group mates. So to say that I rode on their coattails would be an understatement. So when it came time to interview, and one resource that you should look into is a book called Cracking the Coding Interview. And you might even be sitting here and say, oh my God, what is a hash map? That was me in November when Google called me. I was like, I forget what a hash map is. So buy a book. There's a website called LeetCode and another called HackerRank. And I literally, every single weekend, like before my Google onsite, I had sort of like put off the idea of recursion. I was like, no, they're not going to ask me recursion. It's fine. You don't need to know it. And then I was like, okay, I made it to the onsite. I need to go over recursion. And so I literally sat down, reread 222, the recursion part of that textbook. I went through Cracking the Coding Interview, and I did question after question after question. So I think what my suggestion would be, like, if you're thinking like, oh, I'm not smart enough to interview with Google, I was not planning on interviewing with Google, with Twitter, with any of those companies. And then it kind of just happened that I got the call from the recruiter. And so I started doing those coding questions. And definitely with all the courses, as long as you've passed your courses up to this date, you can study your way into these interviews. There's no secret. Buy a book, do the questions, and you will be fine. Like the coding interview books, they are taking questions straight from these books. So just practice the questions and you'll be fine. Like, it's not, if you think right now I'm not good at dynamic programming, that's totally okay. Just do questions from the book and then you'll be good at it.
Things that you are not good at. Well, as I realized as soon as I started interviewing, most of the low-level stuff just whing. So yeah. Up to now, the way I have dealt with things that I'm not very good at is I find other people who are good at them and get them to explain it to me. So yeah, like everybody else has said so far, there's not a heck of a lot that you can't pick up if you just put in the time. So, study it, Google it, find a book, find someone else who can help you with it. Most of the stuff you can pick up, and I haven't yet hit the industry, but I have a feeling that if you have any coworkers, you're both there to get the same job done. So if you don't know how to do something, it's probably a good idea to ask before you do it wrong.
I was not very successful to begin with. I started in engineering, and that was the very wrong way for me to go, and I learned the really hard way. Anyways, if you're committed to something and you're willing to work on it, it will pay off in the long run like you wouldn't believe. Things that I'm very bad at is mostly web development and user experience. And those are two pretty major things these days. Like, you have to know how to build something on a website for a client, or you have to know how to make it usable for someone else who's not you. The ways that I kind of dealt with that was I just had no choice. I just dove in. I spent my weekends, as Kevin mentioned, you learn things on the side outside of school. If you're interested in what you're doing, you will commit to it. And before you know it, you'll actually be really good at something you think that you sucked at. So yeah, that's definitely extremely useful. The other thing is also apply for jobs that you're interested in. Like I said, I'm not into web, I'm not into UI. I did not apply for a single job that required that. I looked for jobs that were specific to what I know I'm good at and that really drive me as a worker, as a student, as whatever you're classifying as. So that would be my two big pieces of advice. And yes, any kind of coding interview book is extremely helpful. If you're interviewing for jobs, you're going to spend a month, if not more, beforehand going through these websites, going through these books, practicing the problems, knowing the routines to get through them, and that'll just make you all the more successful. When you sound confident when you're talking with an interviewer, that's huge. Because if you're confident as you're interviewing with them and then you hit a stumbling block along the way, if they see you're building the right solution, more often than not, these interviewers are actually going to throw you a bone to help you find the next step to actually solve their problem. So if you work on it and you're willing to show that you actually know the steps to get yourself there, they'll usually help you out to complete whatever you're out there to do. 222 and 320. 320 is massive, and 222, know your data structures. Remember how to build graphs from scratch. Remember how to traverse the graphs, dynamic programming, everything we've kind of talked about before.
Parallel's also getting popular.
Yeah, everyone's looking for parallel computing. So even if you're only fluent in Java, I'd really recommend learning Java threads, how you invoke them, how you can join them back together, how you can communicate between threads, extremely important. Yeah, and if you're into web programming, as you know from Ajax, that's all asynchronous, so that's all parallel computing. So you better know how that works if you're going to be good at using Ajax. Advice for job hunting. Prepare early would be like the obvious choice. Really start in advance. Start building up your resumes, talking with contacts who might be references. If you're going to put a skill on your resume, make sure you know it. If you're going to put R on your resume, but you haven't practiced R since SATS 230 2 years ago, it's probably not the best idea unless you've actually been doing it recently. If you have something on your resume, chances are they will pull that up and bring that up in the conversation with you. When I was going through my second interview with MDA, although it was technical, like the way that it was phrased was more like a general conversation. So we'd be talking about different topics and X, Y, Z. And next thing I know, like, we use an MVC for this. And it's like, hey, define an MVC and all these components. And that's things that I hadn't really prepared for. But it's like, you got to actually know what you're talking about. And if you're going to bring it up in your interview or on your resume, make sure you're actually prepared to really describe what it is that you're doing. As it was kind of mentioned earlier, the other big thing is make a public portfolio of the work you've done, whether it's just like your college projects or university projects, I guess, personal projects on the side. Having a GitHub repo is extremely useful. And that's actually, the link to my repository is in my third paragraph of my cover letter. Like, I really push that people who are looking to hire me kind of check out the work that I've done before. And they see that not only do I do the schoolwork, but I'm either contributing to outside projects, doing projects on my own on the side, other work that's just not you're forced to do, but you're interested in doing something. So that would be my big advice.
One question that they'd asked me that I didn't prepare for properly was, what do you like doing? So it's a really good idea to actually know the answer to that question. Know an answer that you can actually be lyrical about, that you know a lot about, and you can talk about, that you actually care about. Because to a certain degree, that is going to affect how the interviewer perceives you. Like, what kind of person are you? How driven are you? That sort of thing.
So obviously, we're probably all going to have just about the same answers here. But one really valuable piece of advice that I got from someone from my resume, and as soon as I changed it, I actually found that I got a lot more responses. First of all, don't be lazy. Actually do a cover letter. Apparently, Twitter doesn't even look at your application if you don't put in a cover letter. They're probably the same with other companies. So make a cover letter. The other thing is on your resume, I changed the format of my resume. So I have the 5-star format where I have stars ranking all of my skills. So in just like 5 stars, I've got my Java, my MySQL, those things, and then 4 stars and 3 stars. And the other big thing that I guess recruiters are looking for that I was told was to have your projects. So have projects and links to that GitHub and describe in your description of those projects instead of your related experience, which mine is okay, but my projects show what I want to work on next. So make sure that your projects are on your 1-page resume. Try not to go over that. Apparently that's a bad idea. So 1-page projects, 5 stars, or some way to actually just list the languages that you know.
To continue on about projects, especially off the resume, you want to make sure that, or on the resume, you want to make sure that you've listed what you did in the project and be prepared to talk about it. A lot of interviewers will start to talk to you and say, okay, so why did you do this? Or what was your specific role in this project? And you should be able to talk about everything that you did. The other thing is when you are actually having an interview, especially on the technical interviews, make sure that you're talking through what you're doing. A lot of them are over the phone, and it's really easy to just kind of go quiet on the other end and just write it out on paper and then maybe try to code it. But if you make a mistake, they don't know what you're thinking. A lot of times that's not the best code produced either in those interviews. So it can be kind of hard to explain the route you were trying to take, and it's a lot easier for the interviewer to give you a little bit of a nudge in the right direction if you're talking to them on the phone. It also makes you come across as a lot more personable.
All right, so the number one piece of advice I can give for this, I'm not sure what year you guys are in, but unless you want to go on to higher education, what you should do is start job hunting, or at least making steps in that direction. Starting late is kind of a bad mistake. You can be building a portfolio throughout your entire time at university. There's no reason not to be doing that. And the first job you get is a pretty important job. It's going to set the pace for the rest of your career. And you only really have to do it once. You're going to, after your first job, at least it's been my experience, that you're going to get recruiters coming to you. So you just got to go to them once, and then once you have a good job, they come to you for jobs, or for offering jobs, which is nice.
This past year, 4th year, is probably your hardest year academically. You're taking a lot harder classes. At least for me, if I wanted to grad in 4 years, I had to take 6 classes in one semester because a year-long class was only worth 3 credits. So like that alone, I was like pretty bottled down with schoolwork. Didn't have much in terms of free time. And then on top of that, I was spending probably close to an hour a day, 5 days a week applying for jobs. I mean, I shared with you guys the number of jobs I applied for. And for each of those, I'm writing like a cover letter, or maybe altering something on my resume, or filling out their stupid questions they ask you. If you were a spirit animal, what would it be, kind of thing. Like this just takes so much time, and it's so stressful. And it's really kind of not reassuring throughout the process. It's not something where you have a progress bar 0 to 100. It's quite literally a checkpoint at 0 and a checkpoint at 100. I got so many denial emails, and I'd wake up in the morning, I'd turn my phone alarm off, I'd see 2 emails, and it'd be, hey, we're no longer considering you, or hey, we're going to move on with other candidates. And it's really discouraging. I don't mean to like bring you guys down or anything, but the point of this is literally don't let it affect your mentality. I kind of had it as a big stress for me. I mean, I've worked so hard to try and build my experience up that I was focusing so hard on landing a good job. And it was really the only reason I went to school is because I wanted to get these jobs, right? So I let it kind of affect me on a personal level. I'm sure Bowen can attest, I was maybe a little bit short with some of my group mates in my coursework. And it really sucked. I'm not gonna lie, it was not a fun year. That being said, once I got the offer from Microsoft, it was again, not to be too cliche, but it was the biggest weight off my shoulders. It was everything I've worked for over 4 years, and it was the best feeling ever. And an hour ago, I got denied from another company, and I'm still getting denial emails. And these aren't just like I interviewed with them and we're going with other candidates, but these are people who aren't even willing to interview me, yet I have a job at Microsoft kind of thing. So these denial emails are no indication of your skill per se. I mean, if you interview technically with a company, they don't move on with you, it's whatever. If you don't even get the chance to interview, which again, in my case was quite a lot, it's whatever. Just like move on, don't let it affect you. Your skills will come out in the right time at the right place, hopefully.